Hello, everybody. Welcome. I don't think there is a need to introduce Madhur to most of you because you all know her. She's the doyenne of Indian cookery and a guru to many people around the world, and especially in the West, in England and in America. Everybody knows Madhur for both her acting career and her food writing career. She has introduced, as the title of the session says, she has taken curry global and introduced especially American audiences to Indian cookery, if I'm not wrong, Madhur.
Yeah, and England. I started off in England and then America, yes.
You know, curry is the dish that everybody knows, but there are many other Indian dishes that you have introduced. You can't hear me. I have to get it very close to my... So Madhur's first book was published in 1973, and of course you started working on it long before that. I know a little bit how you got into it, but our audience doesn't. So can you please tell us, how did you get into food writing while you were an actress already? And what made you want to write about food?
I never wanted to write about food. It was never an interest of mine. My only interest was in eating. And I grew up in Delhi in a family, like most of you, with servants, so nobody cooked. And then at the age of about 20, I arrived in England, and there was pea green smog at that time. The food was terrible. The best thing you could get was fish and chips. Whatever Indian food was available in the few restaurants that there were was, as far as I was concerned, inedible. So, and I was going to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts at that time, and I remember that we had a canteen on the top floor, and we would walk the 5 flights up to the top floor to get a see-through slice of roast beef, quite grey, potatoes and cabbages that seemed to have been cooked for days and days and days. And I would sit there dreaming of things like khade masale ka gosht and aloo gobi. And so I thought, what can I do to learn? I was desperate to learn. And so I started writing letters to my mother to ask her to teach me these things. And my mother sent me very simple 3-line recipes, and I hope most of you speak Hindi Urdu, something like that. कि थोड़ा सा ये डाल दो, थोड़ा सा वो डाल दो, ज़रा उसको भून लो और ज़रा पानी डाल के सब तैयार हो जाएगा. So now but she did tell me what spices, not how many of the spices, how much in quantity. And this is something I discovered years and years later, that I must have had a good palate. And I think to write about food or to cook food, जैसे कहते हैं ना, उनके हाथ में है. It's in the hand. They know how to do it. They get it right. So heart actually is palate. If you can taste it, you can correct it, you can fix it, and you can remember what you ate. जैसे खड़े मसाले का गोश्त, I remember the taste of it. And I tried with my mother's limited ingredients and measurements, but I could say, this is not quite right. I think there's more adrak, there's more this, there's more that. So you work it out by your palate, and that is having a good hand. So I realized that that's what I must have been doing, otherwise how did I get it almost as my mother would have made it? So I started cooking 3 or 4 dishes again and again and again. And then I would write to my mother again, say, a few more please, and then she would send me a few more dishes. Then I became more adventurous. One of my bhabis, my brother had married a Bengali lady, another brother had married, another sister had married a Bohra Muslim, and so I started collecting recipes from their families as well. And when I then I finished my drama schooling in London, and went to America to actually work as an actress, because now I was an accomplished actress. But there was no work. absolutely no work for an Indian who now had learnt at RADA, at the Royal Academy, to speak correctly, how now, brown cow. I could do all that, but who would hire somebody who looks Indian and says, how now, brown cow? So I was getting no work at all. And I thought, what can I do here? And I had my major, I had graduated from college at Miranda House in Delhi with English. So at least I could write. So I started writing for newspapers and magazines, various articles of various sorts. And one of them, mostly they were on art, because I had also wanted to be a painter. So I'm knowledgeable about painting and a little bit about music and a little bit about sculpture. So I was writing articles mostly on the arts. But somebody said to me, would you write a piece on what you ate as a child? So I wrote that, and that sort of hijacked me into a whole other world. I didn't choose to be a food writer, ever. And I felt I was hijacked and taken into this other world. I was approached, would I like to do a book? Would I like to do this? Would I like to do that? All in the food world. Or I was there, and I had little children, and I needed to support them. And I said, all right, if the money is good, I will do it. And the money was very good. So I started doing more and more work in the writing area and in the food area. And I was approached by one person to do a cookbook. And they said, would you write a cookbook for us on Indian food? And there aren't many cookbooks on the subject. And they said, how long would you take to write it? And I said, 3 months. How long does it take to put recipes together? It took me 5 years. I realized that I was quite a perfectionist. And I remember trying out, for example, rasgullas. And every time I made them, they were sour. I said, what am I doing wrong? There's something, I have to try them again and again and again. So I would try them 10 times until I got them right. And so it went in my life of trying and being a bit of a perfectionist and trying to get everything absolutely correct. And I am a one-woman band. I don't have people who test for me. I don't have people who write for me. I don't have people who shop for me. And I trust no one to get the right cauliflower, to cut it the way I want to cut it. So I have to do it all myself, which is a big burden, but it's brought on by me, on me. And so I started writing this cookbook, and it took me 5 years to do. Luckily, I managed to somehow get the best food editor in New York at that time, and her name was Judith Jones, and she was at a wonderful publishing house called Knopf. So she had later had people like Julia Child and Marcella Hazan. I don't know how familiar you are with those people, but anyway, she became my editor, and I learned a lot from her, and she published my first few cookbooks, and that was incredible, an incredible help. And that's how I got to, this is a long answer to the question, but that's how I got into writing about food.
I was very intrigued by your one-woman band because I'm a bit like this. But what is interesting is that your career has been a very long career, from 73 until now. Your last book was published recently, Vegetarian India. And you must have tested hundreds of recipes on your own. And how do you keep your enthusiasm and your freshness? Because it's, I mean, everybody knows who cooks here, you know, like some days they don't feel like cooking, or they think it's a chore more than a pleasure. I mean, it's your profession and it's my profession. We probably have similar approaches or maybe different, but how do you keep that? I mean, it's 40 years, over 40 years is a long time, and juggling your acting career with your food career. So maybe you can tell the audience how you researched. I mean, you collected initially from your family, but after that you went much wider and you traveled and all this. How you keep that enthusiasm, and how do you find different ways to kind of, with each book, to keep it inspiring and fresh? and you know, original as well?
Well, the first thing is that I don't want to bore myself. So I set myself tasks that are hard to fulfill each time. And they are tasks that things that I want to know. And I'm always researching, always looking for recipes. And I feel that I'm like a woman with a begging bowl. Just today, in the place where I'm staying, I like the aloo and the chana very much. So I asked the chef, and there are 2 recipes written on the back of the program for today that I got from this place because they were particularly good. And everybody has a little technique that they do, that only they do, that makes it somehow different. So I just collected 2 recipes today, but what I have worked out a technique. First of all, I'm sitting in New York. And I'm coming to Asia. How am I going to do this? Where am I going? I don't know if I'm collecting Thai recipes, for example. How do I know where to go? So over the years, I have worked out a system where I start researching, like let's say I talk to her. And she says there's this wonderful place in Turkey, on the eastern end of Turkey. There's this town where my jewelry is from and where they have wonderful food. So I would say, tell me the name of the jewelry shop and tell me where you had the best food and give me one name that you might know who would be able to help me. So then through that, I get in touch with somebody and they don't always pan out. But then they will give me another name and they will give me another name. So you arrive in a place and you get name after name after name. And then you try them out. Some people are very good at teaching you. Some people are very bad at teaching you. Some people don't want you to know the whole recipe. For example, this is particularly true in some places I know in India, where you go and you can see it in their eyes. Why should I tell her? I don't want her to make it as good as mine. So very often, if the food is exquisite in that house, I said, okay, don't tell me. But don't let this recipe die. Write it down. Put it somewhere. Don't let it die. Because even with me, people asked me, but you don't tell us everything, right? I said, but I do tell you everything. Because I have this desperate desire to pass on the best of what I can do, the best of what I've learned to you. So you can do it for your children. And I find that people are now in their 3rd generation making things from my book, which they were taught by their mothers or their grandmothers. And they're making it for their children now. So I feel, okay, I'm doing something right. And I will never, never hold anything back. So I'll tell you a story of one place. This was in Hyderabad. And I was trying to get a recipe for a til ki chutney, a sesame chutney. So I know they weren't telling me everything because I could taste that they're not telling me. Ek ne bataya, and they left the tamarind out. Ek ne bataya, usme chini nahi dali thi. Ek ne bataya, usme kuch aur chhod diya. Somebody else left something else out. But if you go to 10 people, they all leave out different things. So in the end, you can put the recipe together and guess at what they are making. So that's one technique. The other technique is you go and this is, people have to be really generous, but I find that they are. Somehow with me, they have been so generous. I went to Bangalore and I wanted examples of like 10 different kinds of cuisines that exist in southern Karnataka. And I asked a friend of mine who's the wife of a playwright. They are always very helpful. People who are writers and tend to be much more generous. So I said, could you set it up for me? I have only so many days. I have a 1 week in Bangalore that I have a morning session and an afternoon session, and people come and cook for me so I can watch. You learn best by watching. Because otherwise, if people write a recipe for you, first of all, they can leave ingredients out. Secondly, they can say the name of a dal in a way that you don't know it. It's their language and a word they use, and you can't understand it. They say green dal. They say, what do you mean? By that time, you've left that place, and all you have a piece of paper that says green dal, and you don't know which one it is. So you need to watch it, see it, and recognize that this is moong dal, this is whole moong dal, this is split moong dal, this is moong dal with chilka or not chilka, with the skin on or not the skin on. So these details you only know by watching somebody cook. And then, of course, you don't know how they cut the vegetable. Like there's a wonderful Karela salad that I have in one of my books. That's from Sri Lanka. And you can cut everything any way you want, but they cut them long into pieces of a same size. And there's a salad made with fried Karela and onions and tomato, and there's green chilies, and there's lime juice, and there's actually kind of fish sauce. It's not a sauce, but it's a kind of fish that they crush, dried fish that they crush and put all over. It's a wonderful, wonderful salad. But you have to see that how they cut it. And the cut makes a great difference to the taste and the look of the dish. So all these things you only know, and then how high is the heat? And that you can't, I just keep looking, kitna turn kiya, ye tez aanch pe bana rahe hain, halki aanch pe bana rahe hain. These things are very important, what kind of heat they're using. And then how long do they cook it? Do they cover it? If they write the recipe for you, they don't always say cover it or don't cover it. So you want to know these things. So I like to watch something we made, and I find that I learn best if I can have all these things. And very often people are generous, and if they are not, I find ways around it.
Well, that's very interesting, because you're absolutely right. Watching people cooking and tasting their food is the key to reproducing the recipe. But then you have to go back to New York and then make those recipes that are very exotic and find the ingredients for them and adapt them to the American kitchen or the English kitchen, because that's where your books are sold mostly.
Right.
So this is the second part of your job. And how do you manage to do that? And how often do you test recipes to get them as right as they were?
Well, I try to get them as close as possible. You can't get them 100% all the time because the ingredients are different. The cauliflower in New York melts in 5 minutes. The cauliflower, certainly in India, you can cook it for 15, 20 minutes. It's still whole and solid, but not so in America. So you learn how to do these things according to the ingredients that you have. The spices are different, but nowadays you can get everything. And there are shops even in New York where I can get most things. You can get them online. You can get a lot of things. So most ingredients are now available, but they taste different and their texture can be quite different. Turnips can be different, beetroots can be different. So you just learn to adjust the way it tasted and looked like in one country to what it's going to taste and look like in another country. And that is, again, a matter of the palate. And you can do it. I mean, it's very possible to do it. And I very often have to do that.
Yeah, because, I mean, now you're right, everything is available, and often in supermarkets. You don't even have to go online. I mean, the quality we're not talking about, because often the quality is not the same. But when you started writing about food, that was not the case at all.
No, not at all. There are spice, especially in England, there are spice companies that say that their whole spice range changed once I started cooking on television. And I remember cooking a chicken dish with a green coriander, hara dhania. And apparently the next day, all coriander ran out in Manchester. There was a little article saying coriander run out in Manchester due to this particular dish that I'd cooked the night before. So people were making these dishes and cooking from them and buying, looking for the ingredients and buying them. And certainly in London, you can actually go into a supermarket and get chapati flour and things like that. Not so in America necessarily, but there are specialty shops where you can get everything. So I think things are greatly improved now, and supermarkets are now beginning to carry mooli, and they call it mooli in London, which I'm so surprised at. So everything is now getting more and more available.
Yes, and then, like, I think it was 10 years into your career that you started working with a company making sauces?
I did. I worked with a company called Tilda, and we manufactured sauces, and we were very successful for about 10 years. And then somebody came and tried to make the same sauces and sold it for less. So we were undercut, and the sauces went out of business. So this is something that can happen, and you then try something else. But commercial sauces were not really something that I was dying to do. I was approached, and there was good money in it, so I said yes. But it's not something that I long to do or want to do, or much prefer the freshly made food. But certainly if commercial opportunities come, I would not look down my nose on them.
But how did you manage to kind of, being such a perfectionist, go into commercial production, which is quite different from like...
Compromise.
Well, give us an example maybe of one of the compromises you made in the range of sauces that you developed for them.
One of the things is that they have to make it last. It's in a bottle, and they have to make it last. So they put either some souring agent into it, and then if it's too sour, balance that with some chemical agent, and you have to look the other way. That's all I can say, because that's how they do it. And either you remain a purist and poor, or you just go ahead and say, okay, just do it, don't tell me, just do what you have to do, and let's get the sauces on the road.
But your name was on the sauce.
I know. So I have done that compromise. I don't use sauces. I didn't use those sauces. I don't use other people's sauces. But I sold them, yes.
It's very refreshing to hear you being so honest about this. But how instrumental do you think you were in kind of, introducing Indian food to the Western public, and them adopting your recipes and going more or less into the mainstream? I mean, obviously not all recipes, but some recipes becoming...
Well, I think Britain had... the first place I was in, and the television programs that I did were first done on the BBC. It's very interesting that the BBC decided to... It was part of their educational series. They didn't think anyone would be interested. And they put it in their sort of educational series, and they printed about 30,000 copies before the series started, and they were sold within a week. They were just so surprised. I was surprised. They were so surprised that they sold so well. And of course, that particular book that I did in the first series has sold over 1 million copies over time. And so it was something that England was ready for, because it had already got lots and lots of bad curry houses. And then suddenly they were able to make things at home that were fresh and clean, and they could do it themselves.
But the American market is quite different. So how did the Americans adopt your recipes and start making them, at home and reproducing them, and, kind of sharing them as well? Because what happens with cookbooks and with recipes is that, they kind of go by word of mouth. I mean, television is a different way of publicizing your work, and it goes much quicker. But if there is no television series, I mean, I know you made several, but people are also instrumental in propagating your work and making it,
I think it took a lot of time in America, and I think it still is. The foods that are most popular in America, other than American food, would be Italian food, which sells very well, and then French food to an extent. But I think other than I think, other than American food, it would be Italian. And I think every country that has had a war with America, their food is popular. Korea, Vietnam. And I feel we've never had a war with America. And once we have a war, our food will be very, very popular. I think there's a kind of intimacy, a frightening intimacy that comes with war. And the soldiers are there, and they're eating the food, and next you know it, they're enjoying it.
Well, traveling is a big element of like popularizing a cuisine. You know, like in England, people didn't travel so much in the 70s, but now everybody travels. They go a lot to Turkey, and all of a sudden Turkish food is very, you know, popular.
Yeah.
And the same for Indian. I guess Americans are more fearful travelers than the Europeans, so they might not kind of want to brave the subcontinent, as it were, you know, in en masse.
But they are traveling much more now. And I think to an extent it depends on the writer, how the writers draw people in, that they get into the cuisine. And I say that because, for example, I don't know if you know her, but her name is Claudia Roden, who writes about, among other things, Turkish food, Mediterranean food. And she also writes the way I do, in the sense that she's very interested in the culture of an area. She doesn't just write a dry recipe. She tells stories with the recipes. She gives background to the recipes. And I also like to do that. And her books are very popular. So I think if you write in a way that engages people, it's more like saying, "Aa jao mere ghar mein, main khana khilaungi. Come to my house, I will teach you how to cook and eat like I eat." So if you can draw them in and paint little pictures of your own culture in some way, then you charm them into wanting to cook the recipes. And I think that aspect is also very important. The other very important aspect is exactness, precision in cookery. You can easily write a bad cookbook if you are not careful to put all the ingredients down in the order in which they should be written. So anyone who comes to me for advice and says, "I want to write a cookbook," I said, "Do. But first of all, have great enthusiasm for what you're going to write. What kind of food are you going to write about? Whatever it is, have great enthusiasm for it. Write honestly and write accurately. Because somebody else making the food needs to know, if you are bhunowing onions, roasting, frying onions, to what extent? Do you want them dark? You want them light? How long will it take to get to that? At what temperature? Say all these things when you're writing. Otherwise, the person has no clue. And when I'm teaching, I used to teach cooking all the time. And I would start browning the onions, and they would say, "Ah, they're done." I said, "No, keep going, because they don't know fried onions. They don't know browned onions. So you have to, if it's a technique that you think they have never done, they don't know, then you have to explain it in great detail. And so if the recipes are written with humor, with imagination, and with accuracy, then they're going to work.
Yeah, that's true. It's very important. And, you know, when I read your recipes, I'm very conscious of how precise you are and how easy it is to reproduce them without knowing the cuisine. Because in writing cookbooks, it's very, especially for the Western market, for a market that is not your native market, you have to be conscious of the fact that most people do not know, and they're kind of being adventurous enough to do these recipes without even, like you've seen them, you've watched them being made. So it's a skill really. And that brings me to your teaching and how you, when you used to teach cooking, how you approached it, and if ever you were impatient with people telling you, no, these onions are enough, for instance, because they're not used to proper browning and stuff. So maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about your experience as a teacher.
Well, I must say I was very sympathetic, because I started out knowing nothing. And when I write my recipes, I assume people know nothing about that dish. And when I'm teaching, it's the same thing. So I remember doing a session on puris for one class, and it was a matter of teaching them how to roll them out and then getting the oil to the right temperature, so when you put them in, they puff up immediately. And it's such a simple thing to make a puri. But it's such a simple thing to make it badly, or not know what to do. If you don't have the oil right, if you don't roll it out in an even manner, it's so easy to get it to not fluff up. And I remember at one time, there was like a meatless week in New York that they were trying out. So I was asked to come to NBC News, and they gave me 1 minute to make a puri. And I was sweating blood because I thought the puri will not puff. I'll be there at this 1 minute to do the puri, and I'll be in front of the camera. The world will be watching, and I'll put the puri down and it'll sink and won't come up and won't puff up. And luckily, I watched it rise, slowly coming up, and poof, and I said, oh God, thank God. But these things can happen. So when I'm teaching, I'm aware, that's one thing. If you're aware of Julia Child's books on French food, she always gives a remedy. If the hollandaise sauce doesn't work out, this is what you can do to fix it. And I think that's also, if you are aware of everything that can go wrong, and so you're holding the person's hand who's cooking, कि घबराओ मत, अगर ये गड़बड़ हो जाए तो ये कर दो, ये गड़बड़ हो जाए तो ये कर दो. If this is wrong, do this. If this is wrong, do that. And that gives people the confidence to even start cooking from your recipe. And I think that is also very important.
It's very important because you have to make the reader, kind of confident and willing to come on the journey with you, as it were.
Yes.
You've written, up to 20 or more than 20 books, a lot of
Something
books.
like that.
Do you have a preference for some of the books you wrote, or the travels that one of your books took you on, like the Curry Bible, where you went everywhere because you covered all the curries all over the world? I mean, is there, of all your work, are there, volumes that you're particularly attached to?
It's like children. You can't say, I like this child more, though inside you might have a little preference. But you'd never say that I prefer this child to another child, and you don't allow yourself to think it even. And I find the same with my books, that they are all equal. They're all my children. But I have a slight feeling for books like A Taste of India. I don't know if any of you have that, but that I went around India, the different states of India, and wrote rather intimate stories about all the different states, the major states of India, what the Bengalis feel towards their hilsa fish, just the emotional attitudes towards their food, etc. So and lovely pictures in that book as well. And then my last book, which in America is called Vegetarian India, I have a little feeling for, because there what I was trying to do was explain how people eat, not just give the recipes. But for example, there's a jeweler in Bombay, and they are three brothers who own 3 or 4 jewelry shops, but they all meet in the Taj Hotel where their shop is for lunch. So they clear off one of those display counters where people try on earrings, and there are mirrors and things there for you to try all this on. All that is cleared, a tablecloth is put down, they're vegetarians, and the meal comes from home. The women have cooked it, and it all comes wrapped in a big tiffin carrier, and then a servant comes, opens up the tablecloth with which it is all tied. Plates are laid out on this little display case, and they sit down to eat. So I just put down the menu and took pictures. My husband took pictures of the jewelers sitting down to eat. And then another thing I wanted very much was not just rich people, now these are very wealthy people, a woman who's picking chilies in Andhra Pradesh, what does she eat? So then I followed her because I was doing a little thing about chili pickers, and she opened like a little tin, a katordan, small little thing. And inside was rice, of course, this is the south. And then she had like a little salsa or little chutney made out of the same chilies that she was picking, and some tomatoes and some onions and and all crushed together just to give a little flavor to her rice. So I like to put these things down because I'm interested. I want to open everyone's lunchbox and see what are they eating and what do they really enjoy. It gives me such pleasure to see something like that, and it fulfills a great deep curiosity. I would like to know what each of you had for breakfast. I would enjoy that. Some people would not be very interested, but I am very interested because it gives me an insight into you, into what kinds of food you might like. And this world palate is such an individual thing. People like different things. I remember following a group of Japanese children around into a movie theater just to see what sort of things they buy to munch in the movie house. And it was dried squid. Everyone bought little packets of dried squid and were chewing on them like chewing gum. And I thought, okay, this is where the fish palate starts. It starts when they're young. They're eating, and they go on to eat dried fish for breakfast and all kinds of other things which we might find rather high. But in an area that is fish, full of fish, that is what they eat, and the palate starts at a very early age. And I remember in my own case, the first things that you aspire to do when you're little, it doesn't matter, like sweet things, you take a piece of bread and put butter and sugar on it, and it's all very nice. But you dream about growing up. In my case, one day I'll wear a sari, one day I'll eat hot food. Chatpata khana, spicy. So we would climb up our mango trees in our house in Delhi and pick green mangoes on the trees, peel them on the trees, and carry with us in our hands little salt, little roasted cumin, little mirch, all mixed up like this. And then somebody would cut and peel the mangoes and pass them to all the cousins who were on the branches like birds. And we would sit in the branches and eat the kacha aam, which was all very sour, the sour green mango. So this is how you start developing a palate. And every nation, I love to do that. See what the little children are eating, because then you get a sense of how and what they will eat when they're older. And you already know from going to the markets and going to homes what they're eating, but you can connect what they're eating as children to what they're eating when they grow up. And I find that fascinating. And I think that's why I love to travel. You'd never stop learning. Every time you go, you're learning something, and that's why I don't think I'll ever retire. I'm here. I'll always be somewhere learning something.
Well, that's amazing. But it's true about children, because like in England, they have nursery food, and they completely ruin the palate of the child because they give them all this bland food, and by the time they're grown up, they're kind of discovering like Indian or Middle Eastern or Japanese, and it's all new to them. And they can't, like, the balance is off, because if you as a child eat your parents' food or your country's food that has a particular flavor profile, you're used to the balance of spices, for instance. You're used to all this, and if you don't give your child this, when they grow up, they don't have that innate palate that you had, or like I had in Lebanon. And that's very important. As a cookery writer, it's also very important because you're conscious of what you're passing on.
Exactly. And I talking about passing on, when our kids were little, we never forced them to finish everything. We just said you have to taste everything. And whether it was Chinese or Japanese or different types of European food, they didn't have to finish it, but they had to taste it. And the result is that by the time they were 13, there were a lot of ews, I don't want to eat it, tomorrow I'll eat it, anything to get the food away. I said, it's all right, you don't have to finish, but taste it. And by the time they were 14, 15, they were eating everything. And now at least my daughters cook everything. They're wonderful cooks. And their children just assume, and then my grandkids cook too. And they grew up, my grandkids grew up assuming that every family has Japanese food, Chinese food, Korean food, because that's how they were raised. And I think that's wonderful for children, because you expose them. But if you're sitting there looking apprehensive and saying, this is not something I would eat, then the child gets that same fear and insularity and doesn't want to try new things. And it's wonderful if you can just open the world to them. Don't force them, but just let them be open to it. And one day they'll come back.
Before we take questions, I have one last question myself, which is, how do you juggle your work as an actress and your work as a food writer? Because they're two different fields. I mean, food is everywhere, so that's...
I take whatever comes. But I find that there have been times when I've accepted a BBC series and I get a film at the same time. That kills me. I just don't know what to do. But if I've accepted something, I can't then say, I am not going to do it. So I just go through it, and I've lost a lot of films this way. But there you go. This is life. And I refuse to have regrets. I just keep going.
Now we can, anybody has questions? Is there a microphone?
There's one
I think
right
we
there.
have some microphones out here. Is this one on?
I'll ask a question, but I have to make an announcement that Madhur will be there calling me at 2:30, and I promise you that that session will be, if not, just as interesting as it. My question, may I have a mic?
Here, you can borrow my...
There the young lady comes with a mic. I hope it works. Hello. My question is, you know nihari, and I think the best nihari that I've tasted was in Chicago, Devon. And there, I went there and I found it was very tasty. Who cooks it? A Mexican cooks nihari. So I said, Acha, so how come a Mexican? He said, we had got Karachi to cook nihari. He jilted us and he went to Dallas because he was getting twice that salary. So the Mexican was his masalchi and his number two. So he picked it up and he said, don't worry, he came to, I was doing the work, he was getting the credit. So he started making it. I took the owner's permission and went to interview him. And this man wouldn't speak English, he would speak Spanish. He wouldn't move. So our boys, the waiters from Karachi, had to learn Spanish. So I asked, कि इससे पूछो कि ये निहारी जो बनाता है, the one who he makes निहारी, तो ये खुद भी खाता है, घर ले जाता है. तो कहने सवाल मेक्सिकन स्पेनिश में हुआ, जवाब आया, ये कोई खाने की चीज है? So my question is that do you have to like the food that you cook or not necessarily?
I basically cook the food that I like. And now the nahari is an interesting thing, because I've had naharis made with shin, and I've had naharis that are really payas. It depends on where you are. So there are many versions of it. Any other? You had a question there. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me? What do you think of all of the MasterChef projects? There's a new MasterChef Asia, and are you involved in any way?
No, I'm not familiar with it, but I know master chefs in America and England, and I think it's wonderful. I think what's happening is that my grandkids never watched cartoons. They watched cooking shows, and they are as attractive to them for some reason. And I heard my little grandson and my granddaughter arguing with each other about chocolate, something. And the boy said something, and the little girl, who was all of 3, said, "No, Baba, it is not that, it is ganache." And I said, "How does she know the word ganache? Even I don't know that word." But they watch these programs, and they learn, but they are entertained, which is quite interesting. So that's all I know about master chefs. Sorry? Nobody's asked me, but if they do, I might do it.
Madhur, here.
Okay.
Okay. I think from your first book till your latest book, I have all of them. And I've learned cooking through them because, you know, I love cooking. So, and my sisters are chefs, and my daughter is a cook also. So tell me one thing, most of us who cook also eat our own food, and we're looking forward to the next meal because we want to create something else. Obviously you don't eat as much because you don't look like you put on any weight.
You don't know the half of it. I have to stay this way because I'm also an actress, and it's hard work. I have to eat carefully, I have to try and exercise, all that rubbish I have to do, just like everything else. It just doesn't happen naturally, and especially not at my age. Now, ek zyada jalebi khali, and I've had it, you know. So I have to be careful too, and I have to exercise.
Can you tell us about a disaster or a potential disaster you might have had in the kitchen and how you
There
averted
seems to be
it?
more than one mic round.
Yes, there are.
Sorry?
We'll take this question, and then the lady next to her, and then we'll take your question after. There is time.
Okay.
Should I repeat it? Or
Yes, no. You asked, I'll repeat the question in case you didn't hear it. Have I had disasters in the kitchen? All the time. And the thing is, how do you get out of it? We had invited Dizzy Gillespie for dinner. My husband said, "Dizzy is coming for dinner." I said, "Oh my God, what am I going to make?" So I said, simplest thing, he may not like Indian food, I'll just roast a fish. And it was early days. So I roasted a fish, brought it to the table, and I put it in front of Dizzy, and I said, "Would you like to cut the fish?" And he put his knife in, nothing moved. It was raw, it hadn't cooked. I was so embarrassed, I had to say, "Excuse me," take it back, put it in the oven for another 30 minutes before it was cooked. So I've done things like that, put too much salt, too little salt. Some people don't apologize and just go on. I'm just forever saying, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." But if it's done, it's done. We are all human. Once I had a whole lot of people, including the editor of Gourmet magazine, for dinner, and somebody said to me, "The kitchen's on fire." And sure enough, it was on fire. And they all remember the meal at my house where the kitchen almost burnt down. So there you go. And again, with the same editor of Gourmet magazine, I was pouring a tea from a new teapot that I had just bought because I was serving a special tea from China where it opens up like a flower inside. You've probably seen it. So bada khubsurat. It looked gorgeous, you know, inside this clear new teapot that I had brought. But as I poured it into her cup, the lid fell into her cup. So things like that happen, but what can you do? You're human, and just forget about it and go on.
Madhur, just to let you know that I'm really thrilled to meet you today and to hear you. I grew up 1982, I was in London, and I learned cooking from you. But what was so elegant was not just the way you cooked, but also the saris you wore and the elegant way that you explained everything. My question now is, what is your favorite cuisine and dish?
What kind of dish?
What is your favorite dish, or what is your favorite cuisine?
Okay, first of all, let me tell you that I don't look like this when I'm cooking. I wear the worst clothes, and I don't always wear an apron, though one is always hanging there. But I don't put it on, and everything gets splattered with turmeric, and my hands turn turmeric-y. And I say my children grew up with a mother who smelt of garlic, which I'm sure is the perfume. I remember my mother's evening in Paris perfume that she wore. They remember garlic, I think. But in the cooking shows, I'm all saried up. Yes, that's quite true, but not in real life. You won't find that in real life. Now, favorite dishes. I'm very happy with a good dal and chawal. It's just, and you give me a little dahi, good dal chawal, and I am in heaven. Somebody at the back.
Okay. Adab.
Hello, how are you?
Naeem Tahir हूँ.
Could somebody take care of the mic?
Yeah, there's a lady giving you another.
मैं नईम ताहिर हूँ. We talked briefly on telephone with reference to my son Farhan, जिसको आप
Yes.
जानते हैं. Very warm welcome to Lahore. I'm here along with Yasmin, my only wife,
Hello, by the way. Nice to meet you.
and the granddaughter of Muhammadi Begum. Now, if maybe you are familiar, Muhammadi Begum wrote Muhammadi Begum's Dastarkhan in the first decade of 1900. And that original is still with us, with all the recipes of that time and the past period of the 19th century. Would there be any interest in those recipes if we make them available?
Absolutely. You should translate them and make a book. Absolutely. Now let me explain to the audience.
I can't translate this because I wouldn't know the equivalent name of the ingredients. So I would really need your guidance.
Somebody will know, but let me explain to everyone here how I know this gentleman. His son is an actor, a wonderful actor, and who is a very good friend of my daughter, Sakina, who is an actress, and they work together. And Farhan knew that I was coming here, and my daughter knew I was coming here, so they felt I should know the father.
His
This is
Othello,
just- That's what I'm telling you. Yes.
his Othello opens day after tomorrow in Washington.
Oh, good.
He's playing the title role.
All right. So I do think you should write, because this is my fear, that books like this get lost. And somebody should take the trouble to translate them, because we are all dying to know what were people actually cooking and eating in the 1900s. We are
Yes.
dying to know. I look for books like that.
Well, I have that book, but I wouldn't know how to translate it because I wouldn't know the equivalents of the
But you get
ingredients.
help. You
Huh?
get help with people who are
Would you-
chefs, who are cooks, and ladies of the house who are very good with kitchen ingredients. Get help with that.
Would you help?
I would help if I knew. I don't read Urdu if it's written in Urdu. So that would be a difficulty for me.
Okay, we'll solve that.
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? A microphone to the lady. Okay, there's a lady in front as well. We have 10 more minutes, so we're pressed for time.
Yeah, that lady. Up. Up. But you don't have a mic.
Okay, you can borrow my mic.
Perfect, thank you. This is a question for the both of you. Has there ever been any recipe that you guys just haven't been able to conquer? You've tried, just hasn't come through.
Conquer. Yeah, there are many. I mean, there's so many that I couldn't even name them. But sometimes you're trying to get a recipe from a place. There's a Parsi restaurant in Bombay, and I wanted the exact recipe for what they call a berry pulao. So the berry part is zaresh, which is a berry in Persia, and it is made with that. And there's also some chicken koftas in it. It's quite an elaborate pulao. And he said that the American ambassador came. This is the story this 90-year-old guy told me. He said the American ambassador came and said, give me the recipe for this berry pulao. And I said to him, if you give me the recipe for Coca-Cola, I will give you the recipe for the berry pulao. He never gave me the recipe, but I worked it out because once you eat it, you can taste it and you can guess. Some things you might get slightly wrong, but the final taste is more or less that was the resh pulao.
In my case, it's not a recipe as much as a kitchen. There is a sweet maker in Damascus who makes actually the best baklava in the whole of the Middle East. And for years before the war, I've been trying to get into their kitchen and watch their cooks, make the baklava and understand a little bit what is the secret of their baklava compared to others. But he would never let me in there. So I make baklava, but not like theirs.
Mathur, I wanted to point out that with all this fusion food, very often you lose the original recipe. And I find that happening in Pakistan.
I can't hear. With all the fusion
food, you lose the original
first
recipe.
part I heard.
And it's often, in homes as well, you're just not being, the khansamas are not able to focus on the right ingredients to even make a pulao or do a nice sabzi or even do a tadke wali dal. And I just feel that, we may in time lose our original recipes and, just not find our way and have all this fusion of Chinese and Japanese and Pakistani and Japanese and whatever, just very confusing, at least for me.
Well, I have two things to say on this one. All food is fusion food. There is nothing that has stayed the same from 4,000 years ago till today. Most things other than khichdi probably have changed. And I think there are always influences. After all, half the spices and the ingredients we have in our part of the world came from somewhere else. They didn't originate with us. Potatoes, tomatoes, things we use on a daily basis. Cumin and coriander came from Egypt and places like that. Wheat came from the Middle East. So we had some things, but we didn't have everything. So fusion is a dirty word that can be used for food, but it's not always applicable in a bad way. Because as I said, all food eventually is fusion. And we learn, either we get ingredients from somewhere else or techniques from somewhere else, and we apply them. But the great thing about our subcontinent is that we take techniques from everywhere and ingredients from everywhere and make them ours. In the end, even though the potato came from somewhere, hundreds of potato dishes taste like our dishes, and we somehow manage to make them ours. So fusion food could be bad. It depends on the fuser, if I may say so. If your palate is good, you can mix and match and make something wonderful. If you have a palate that's not so good, then the results will be not so good. It's how you taste, how much you can taste. And how much you can taste and how well you taste means that's how much you retain. For example, I'll tell you, because I go on about this palate business, it's very important. Because if you can taste well, then it's like your computer. It goes into a file in your head. Now, I can go into the bazaar and I see green beans and I say, okay, if I make them with rye and zira, it's going to taste like this. And in my mouth, I'm chewing it and say, I don't want that today. And then I say, okay, if I make it with ginger and mushrooms, it's going to taste like this. And I taste that. I say, oh, I think I'll have that. So you are imagining, but with the help of the palate and the file in your brain, you are tasting the dish and deciding on what you want to make. So that is a very important aspect of cooking.
I think we have one last question from this gentleman.
One last question there.
Yes, my question is really a part statement. My first experience of Indian cooking was hello, yes, it was in Belfast, where in the early 70s, which was probably flavoured with Semtex. Would you agree that we in the UK have learnt a great deal, not only from you, but also from experience, and that our Indian cooking has improved immeasurably?
I would totally agree. It has improved immeasurably. It had a far to go, but it has gone there now. And I think you can get pretty decent Indian or Pakistani food in London, certainly. Right now, I can't speak for everywhere, but I know that London, you can get very good kebabs, you can get very good quail, roasted quail, because I've had it, and you can get southern dishes, you can get Gujarati. There's a wonderful Gujarati place called Gujarati Rasoi. So it depends on what you're looking for, but you can get a good range of regional foods all over London, that I know.
Well, that's our time up. Thank you so much, Madhur. It was very good. Thank you.